Hi and welcome to another story, and today we have part 5 of The Runaway Girls by Jacqueline Wilson, continuing from chapter 9. Monmouth Street wasn't at all how I'd expected. I'd imagined a couple of drapers with neat window displays and smart staff in black dresses and white aprons. Every shop here sold clothes, the windows crammed full with stalls in front of the stores with further clothes laid out like whiting on a fish stall. They were mostly garish colours and designs, the kind that would make Miss Groan wince. Some were grubby with hanging hems. Some had obvious stains down the front. A few were almost as ragged as the frock I was wearing. "But these aren't new," I wailed. "Yeah, but you can find some fine stuff in amongst the rags," said Kitty. "But it's all second-hand, or third, or fourth-hand, judging by the condition. I could never wear another person's clothes," I declared. "For pity's sake, ain't you wearing my frock?" Kitty asked impatiently. I blushed at my lack of tact. "I'm sorry, Kitty. I didn't think. I just meant I couldn't wear a stranger's clothes." "Well, make out you know them then." She picked up a limp, checked garment with a split seam. "Hello, little frock. We used to wear you." "Who used to wear you?" "Oh, my, Miss Pound girl with lots of money, is that right? Only she ran away and didn't have a kind friend to look after her, so she had to sell you for sixpence to stop herself starving?" "All right, you don't have to carry on like that. I get your point," I said, shamefaced. "Anyway, you don't keep their best clothes out in the stalls in case they get stolen. They have all the fancy stuff inside, where they can keep an eye on them. Hey, you might even find your own clothes, Lucy, and then we can buy them back," said Kitty. "So you think that horrible old woman stole from me in that alley, and then she sold them to someone else?" I said. "Well, what else would she do with them? She couldn't squeeze them into them herself, could she?" said Kitty. "I know that, but I thought she might want them for her granddaughter," I said. "Oh, Lucy, you're a comic, you are," said Kitty. She took my hand. "Come on, let's size up all the shops. See if there's one that takes your ladyship's fancy." We found a better one right at the end of the street, with a display of children's clothing in the window. There were several small jackets, with full sets of brass buttons, some nankeen trousers, and an assortment of frocks in checks and floral patterns, a little washed out, but in reasonable condition. A row of button boots were lined up 2 by 2, as if about to set off on a march. In pride of place there was a beautiful lace christening robe, with a matching soft little bonnet tied with long ribbons. It looked brand new. "Oh, my goodness! Do you suppose the baby died before it could even be christened?" I said. "How horrible!" I imagined little Angelique sickening and dying in her cot, and felt a surprising pang of sisterly grief. "Buck up, Lucy. Let's go inside and see what they've got tucked away," said Kitty. There was an old crone sitting in the rocking chair inside the shop. She appeared to be sound asleep, her bonnet pushed sideways so that she seemed to have only half a face. But at the sound of our footsteps, her one visible eye opened, her shaky old hands adjusted her bonnet, and she sat up straight, scowling at us. "Shoo, you little varmints," she said. "That's a fine way to treat your customers," said Kitty, tossing her head. "You ain't got enough money to buy the scrapings from under my fingernails," the old woman snapped, rocking her chair vigorously. "Out, and woe betide you if you try to snatch anything." She reached for a stout stick nearby and tapped it hard on the floor, making me jump and take 2 steps backwards. Kitty was undeterred. "What's this then?" she said, tapping the reticule around her neck so that the coins jingled together. "Tinny, tinny, tin! So, could you please stir yourself and show me and my companion your finest frocks, because we was robbed of our own clothing, see?" "A likely story," said the crone. "Show us that tin then. How do I know it's genuine?" Kitty unhooked the reticule from her neck and brought out a handful of pennies and a silver sixpence. The old woman took the sixpence and put it in her mouth. I stared in astonishment, thinking she was eating it, but she was biting it to see if it was real. She said, nodding her head, and then went to slip it in her apron pocket. "Hey, we haven't made a purchase yet. Give that back, if you please," said Kitty. "No flies on you," said the old woman, and gave the sixpence back, glistening with her saliva. Kitty popped it back with the rest of our funds without grimacing. "So, are these the finest togs you can offer?" she said, running her fingers along the limp frocks hanging from a clothes rail. "Don't think much of 'em, do we, Lady Lucy?" It was hard to see them properly in the shadowy shop, but they certainly didn't look very promising. "I don't suppose you have any silk dresses, preferably in blue?" I asked. "And red, scarlet or crimson, I'm not fussy," Kitty added. "Silk, eh? You're a pair of droll little madams," said the crone, huffing and puffing as she eased herself out of her rocking chair. She shuffled to a large wardrobe right at the back of the shop and opened it up. I peered at the frocks hanging inside, feeling the materials. Several did seem to be silk, but they were ladies' frocks, far too big for me, and rather too fancy too. There was a blue one, but it was very immodest, tremendously low cut at the front. I didn't possess a bosom to fill it out, so it would show me all the way down to my belly. Could you maybe cut it down to your size and sew it so it fitted? Kitty asked. I'm afraid I've always been a total duffer at needlework, I said truthfully. Gaffer was always very nimble with his fingers. He could sew a treat, but he never learned me how, said Kitty. She turned to the old woman. Could you alter the frock so it fits my friend? With these hands, she replied, waving her crooked fingers in the air. I sells frocks, I don't sew 'em. Can't sew a bloomin' button nowadays. Now let me see, it was blue you was wanting, wasn't it? And red, said Kitty. Well, I've got blue, said the old woman, rummaging in another closet. Here, girlie, the prettiest little frock in the whole shop, and I reckon it'll fit you perfectly. Not silk, but it's the finest cotton, and a lot more practical. I stared at the frock, shivers running up and down my arms. I knew that material. It was a soft sky blue, patterned with small sprigs of white flowers. I had laid my head against the sweet cotton countless times. I had sometimes pretended my fingers were fairies dancing round and round each flower. Nurse had a dress made of that exact material. I held the frock to my face, breathing in deeply. It didn't smell like Nurse's wonderful warm toastiness, because it wasn't her actual frock, just a tiny replica made for a little girl, but it was still greatly comforting. It looked just about the right size for me too. It wasn't silk, it wasn't grand, it was a simple summer dress without a single frill or a scrap of lace. The new mother and Miss Groan would think it a frock far below my station, but I wanted it more than anything in the world. I absolutely love this dress, I declared. I must have it. I looked at Kitty hopefully. She was frowning at me. Oh dear, do you think it's too expensive? I asked. It will be now, as you've shown her how much you want it, Kitty hissed. The old woman was smiling and rubbing her hands together. Of course your little friend wants it. She had her taste. She's fallen for the most special frock in my establishment, and who can blame her? She said. 10 bob and she can have it, with a petticoat thrown in. An absolute bargain. 10 bob, said Kitty. Are you crazed in the head? Come on, Lucy, we'll go somewhere else. She took my hand and pulled me towards the door. What is 10 bob? I said, confused by the term. 10 pennies. 10 whole shillings, said Kitty. It would use up practically all our money, and it's just a cheap country dress not worth a single bob. She had us outside the door by now, though I was looking back longingly. I do like it so, though. Can't we ask her to save it until we have enough of those bobs? I said. You can have it now, you noodle, if you act like you don't want it, Kitty muttered. Come on, quick march. Look like you're disgusted, then she'll come running after us. I tried to do as she said, bewildered. We went out of the shop and walked back down the road. She's not coming, I said, peering around. You wait, and don't look back. So I went on walking, and sure enough, we heard tottering footsteps behind us. Oi, you two, don't go so fast, I can't keep up. I'm only a poor old woman, not too steady on her pins. Come back and I'll see if I can make some kind of reduction, seeing as you're 2 sad kiddies and scarcely a stitch on your backs. I bore 8 children and I've still got a mother's heart, she said. No, my friend's just spotted something better in this shop here, said Kitty, winking at me. We played this charade for a while, but eventually let the mother's heart beat faster by accompanying her back to her shop. She held the blue frock against me, and my own heart swelled at the sight of myself in her cracked looking-glass. Kitty beat her down to half a crown, 2 shillings and a 6pence, and that was with the offered petticoat and a pair of drawers too. Because my friend needs undergarments, don't she? She said. I needed stockings and boots too, because my feet were so sore now, they stabbed me at every step. I wanted fancy stripes and kid boots, but I could see they were an extra expense and realised that kid boots wouldn't last long if Kitty and I went walking so much. I settled for rather ugly black boots that were a little too big for me, but very stout, with good soles scarcely worn down. I chose a thick pair of grey socks that filled up the space in the boots. Kitty bargained hard for these too, knocking the old woman down to 1 shilling for the boots and 2pence for the socks. And there I was, kitted out for the 3 shillings 8 pennies, which really did seem a bargain. Try them all on first, said Kitty. Make sure they all fit proper and aren't falling apart. You cheeky madam, my clothes are all the finest quality, said the old woman, but she seemed to have grudging respect for Kitty now. You've got an old head on those skinny little shoulders. I stepped out of Kitty's ragged dress, peeping inside the pocket. Trampy was curled up, nose twitching, wondering what was going on. I put the dress on the floor, folding it over so that she couldn't climb out. Kitty nodded at me approvingly. She nodded even more when I put on all my new clothes and tied the laces on my boots. There now. You look a picture, Lucy, she said. I peered in the old looking-glass. I didn't really look like me any more. Prim little Lady Lucy in all my many fine garments. I didn't look like a street urchin either, in poor Kitty's wretched frock. I looked a whole new person, cherished and respectable, like a little granddaughter for nurse. Kitty handed over the money, counting it out carefully, penny by penny. There seemed quite a lot left in the reticule. Now, it's your turn, Kitty, I said. Nah, let's save the rest of the tin. I'll just have my own frock back, she said. But it's all dirty and torn, I said, and it's such a dull colour. I like it, said Kitty, her chin up. Perhaps it was because Gaffer had bought it for her. Well, I'm sure it was a lovely rich colour once upon a time. I thought of my paint box at home. Burnt umber. I've never burnt it, said Kitty, who clearly wasn't familiar with paint colours. And I don't mind that it's a bit faded now. But I thought you said you'd like something red, I said. Red, said the old woman, folding her arms. I could find you a saucy scarlet number, easy as winking, but it's not for the likes of you, little girl. Shame you're not a boy. I've got a trunk full of clothes from a theatre troupe that went bust, and there was a fetching crimson number from a boy acrobat. An acrobat's outfit, said Kitty, suddenly eager. Oh, I've seen tumblers performing. They're wonderful. Can I see it? But it's for a boy, with little trousers, said the old woman. Let me see them, please, said Kitty, clasping her hands pleadingly, forgetting all her advice to me not to sound too eager. The old woman went to a big trunk in a corner and undid the clasps, with much huffing and puffing, and then she drew out the most marvellous garments in rich scarlet and gold and Prussian blue, and several white muslin frocks with very short flimsy skirts. Oh, they're like fairy dresses, I said, but Kitty wasn't interested. She waited, watching intently until the old woman found a small crimson velvet number. There was a little jacket edged with gold braid and matching trousers, very short and puffy, rather like bloomers, and there was a cap too with a gold tassel. Oh, said Kitty softly, and then again, oh, but they're boys' clothes, Kitty, I said. I don't care, said Kitty. How much are they? Well, this is a quality velvet scarcely worn, and the outfit is beautifully cut, smart, but so soft, the old woman crooned, rubbing the jacket against her cheek. And fancy having the little cap to set it off. Look, it's even got a silk lining. Finest theatrical clothes always fetch a high price because of their quality. Made to last years, they are. I reckon I could get 15 bob for this little number. You're out of your mind, said Kitty, regaining her common sense. 15 bob for used theatricals? Now, come on, Lucy, let's go. I wouldn't pay 15 bob if they was sewn with gold thread and studded with rubies. Do you think I'm falling for that trick again? You can prance out of here if you like, but I'm not following you this time. 12 bob, that's my final offer. Take it or leave it, said the old woman. They faced each other, both of them breathing heavily. We ain't got 12 bob, said Kitty. You know that. Then clear off and come back when you've got it, the old woman replied. I dare say you've got ways and means. Steal another couple of purses. I'm not a thief, Kitty said angrily. We earn our tin, honestly, don't we, Lucy? Yes, of course we do, I said, anxiously thinking of the sad stories we told about our dead mother when we were begging. Were they lies? Both our mothers were dead, after all. I tried to remember all 10 of the commandments in the Bible, checking whether lying was amongst them. I didn't think so, but I remembered the strange command not to covet my neighbour's ex or ass. Kitty didn't have any neighbours, but was coveting a shopkeeper's acrobat outfit vaguely similar. Perhaps we were both destined to go to hell. Why on earth did Kitty want the acrobat clothes so much anyway? Why wouldn't she settle for a nice plain frock like mine? Then we'd pay another 3 shillings and 8 pence for undergarments and boots, and we'd both be fully kitted out in a matching pair. I looked at her face, sharp with longing. I couldn't bear it. I went up to the old woman and took her hand. Couldn't you find it in your heart to reduce your price a little, I said. My poor little sister used to have a red velvet cloak that could have been cut out of the very same cloth as this acrobatic outfit. Our mother sewed it especially for her because she loved the Little Red Riding Hood story so much. It was her dearest possession. When our dear mother died of a fever, Kitty wore her cloak all the time, even when we went to bed. Then we had to run away from home because our father took to drink in his grief, and a wicked woman stole our clothes from us. We've had to beg on the streets and eat scraps, and now we have earned just enough money to clothe ourselves decently. You can guess why Kitty wants something red. Please, dearest madam, take pity on us. She had remained stony-faced inside her bonnet until the last sentence of my speech, but she softened in surprise when I addressed her as madam. 5 bob, she said huskily. Thank you so much, I said. I reached into the reticule and scooped out nearly all the cash. I had to squat on the floor to count it in 5 rows of 12 pennies, trying to be quick before she changed her mind. Kitty looked stunned. Then she opened her mouth. I guessed she might argue and try to get the price down further, and I could see that the old woman had reached her limit. Hush now, dear, I said warningly. Put your little outfit on. Kitty stuck her skinny arms into the jacket. It fitted her perfectly. She pulled the bloomers up her legs, tucking her shift neatly inside. She looked like a real acrobat. And when she put the cap on top of her curls, I couldn't help clapping. "Oh, Kitty, you look splendid," I said. Kitty peered at herself in the looking-glass and grinned from ear to ear. "I do, don't I?" she declared. The old woman folded her arms and looked at Kitty, her head on one side. "Well, it ain't an outfit you could wear in church on a Sunday, but I must admit it suits you down to the ground," said the old woman. "But don't you need coverings on your legs, Kitty?" I asked. "Nah, I've got brown skin. That's covering enough," she said. "And boots, for when it gets colder," I suggested. "I hate boots. They just rub my toes and heels," said Kitty. The old woman was rummaging in a box of black kid slippers. "Try these," she said, selecting the smallest pair. They were an exact fit and so light that Kitty danced around the room. "They're perfect," she declared. She unclasped the reticule for the last of the money, but the old woman shook her head. "You'll think I've gone soft as butter, but have them on me, kiddie," she said. "Now scram." We thanked her and scrammed obediently. We got to the other end of Monmouth Street when Kitty stopped dead. "My old frock," she said. We rushed back and dived into the shop again. The old woman was back in her rocking chair, her bonnet askew, her eye open. "Not you two again? You ain't having any more out of me?" No, madam. "When we're extremely sorry to trouble you all over again, but my friend just wants her old frock back. That one I was wearing," I said. "What?" she said impatiently. "Oh, for pity's sake, look, it's over there." She gestured to a big box labelled Penny Rags. "The cheek of it. My dress isn't a rag." "Shush, Kitty," I hissed, worried the old woman might change her mind and demand more money for her outfit. "Just take your dress and we'll be off." Kitty rummaged in the box, up to her elbows in old rags. "What's the matter?" "It's there, right at the top, can't you see?" I said. "I can see my frock, but the pocket's empty," said Kitty, burrowing further. "Oh," I gasped, getting her meaning. "What do you mean, the pocket's empty?" said the old woman. "What was in it then? More tin? Are you accusing me of stealing off you?" "No, of course not, madam. There was no money in the pocket, I promise you," I said. "So what was in it, might I ask?" she said, squinting at me. I had a very strong feeling she wouldn't like it that I told her the truth. "Just her pocket handkerchief, very ragged and not even worth a penny, but she needs it because her nose keeps running," I blurted out. Kitty looked furious. "No, it don't," she protested, but she made a sudden pounce. "Got you," she said. "What's she got?" the old woman asked, heaving herself out of her rocking chair suspiciously. Kitty had her hand on the waistband of her red velvet bloomers, and then she wriggled. "My, hankin," she said. "Right, we'll be off now." She clutched her brown frock and hurried to the shop doorway, adjusting her bloomers, giggling as if she were being tickled. "Once again, thank you for your kindness, madam," I said, and hurried after her. We made all the way down Monmouth Street this time, and then dodged down an alleyway so Kitty could rescue Trampy from inside her bloomers. "There now," she said, stroking her. "I think you need a little treat after all your adventures." She popped her in the pocket of her brown frock, folded it carefully into an envelope shape, and then wore it on her hands like a muff. It slightly spoilt the effect of her outfit, but she still cut a very dashing figure. People turned and stared at her, smiling. Kitty walked a little stiffly at first, not used to wearing slippers, but she soon got used to it. We went to a baker's shop around the corner and spent our last coins on a big bacon pie and an apple turnover for dessert. I carried them carefully in a paper bag until we found a little park. We sat on a seat in our new finery and shared our picnic, feeding Trampy little titbits. There was a drinking fountain nearby, so we could quench our thirst. Kitty held Trampy so that she could drink too. "That's what I call a good meal," said Kitty, rubbing her tummy. "But we've spent all our money," I said. "Well, we'll earn heaps more," said Kitty. "We can both sing, and I can work up a little tumbling act. Watch." She gave me Trampy and demonstrated on the grass, turning several somersaults and then standing on her head, waggling her legs. She'd have looked indecent if she'd chosen a dress from the old woman, but she looked just like a little circus boy in her red velvet outfit. Several strolling couples smiled appreciatively, and one gentleman actually threw a penny into the rolled-up dress, thinking it was a begging bowl. I had a quick peep at Trampy, but luckily it hadn't stunned her. "Shall we try begging properly now?" I suggested. "I could try singing something jolly while you tumble." I thought hard, going over words in my head. "See the little tumbling boy, round and round he goes, like a little spinning toy till he falls on his nose." "Is that a proper song?" Kitty asked, looking astonished. "No, I just made it up," I said. "How do you do that?" Kitty frowned, her face screwed up with effort. She thought for a couple of minutes and then gave up. "I can't do it." I couldn't help smirking. "Still, I don't like that bit when I fall on my nose." "I never fall over," said Kitty, trying to put me in my place. "Yes, but That's just the first verse, I assured her. There's more. I know there had to be now. I thought quickly. He blows his nose without a care and wipes his velvet vest, then does a handstand in the air to give his feet a rest. You're really making this up just like that? Kitty asked. There's a bit more coming, I said. Aha! Throw a coin for the tumbling boy, and he'll waggle and wave his feet. It will give our boy the greatest joy, and also a bite to eat. Oh, Lucy, you're a magician, said Kitty. Sing it again so I can practice. I'm not sure I can remember it all, I said, but I did my best. Kitty circled me, tumbling over and over, pretending to fall, and then walking round on her hands, waggling and waving for all she was worth. By the fourth run-through, we had the whole little item off by heart, and a crowd had gathered around us, clapping and cheering and throwing coins. Looks like we're going to make our fortune, Lucy, said Kitty. Chapter 10. We refreshed ourselves with hokey pokey, brought from a stall in the park. I'd always longed to try this iced cream, but Miss Groan had paled at the thought of me eating out of doors, and even Nurse said it was only for common children. Well, it was common now, and when I took the first delicious milky mouthful, I was very glad of it. Oh, Kitty, that was so wonderful, I said, when I'd finished. I could eat it all over again. Then let's, said Kitty, and she bought 2 more scoops. It was strawberry flavour this time, and even tastier. Miss Groan and Nurse would both say I'd get a stomachache for being so greedy, but it didn't hurt at all. It just felt blissful. We did 10 turns of the tumbling boy until the reticule jangled with tin, and then we went for further refreshments at the park cafeteria. We knew we could scavenge in the waste paper bins and find discarded sandwiches and pies and cakes for nothing, but it felt very grand to go right into the cafeteria and order for ourselves. We had 2 freshly cut sandwiches, ham and cheese, and a plum tart and a ginger parkin, and a drink of lemonade each, served in a proper glass. The woman behind the counter had been watching us earlier and seemed almost in awe of us. Are you theatre folk or from a circus, girls? She asked as she served us. We are professional performers and prefer doing our show in the open air, said Kitty grandly. Well, you're both very talented little girls. So where are your parents then? They must be very proud of you, she said. Oh, they are, madam. They call us their own dear little sugar plums and make such a fuss of us, I said. And quite right too, she said. Well, eat up your meal quickly, girls, because the park will be closing in 10 minutes. We had no trouble wolfing everything down, surreptitiously sharing our feast with Trampy whenever the cafeteria woman turned her back to us. When we went outside, it had started to rain. It was only a light drizzle, but it came as a shock. We had had such glorious fine weather all week that we had forgotten the possibility of rain. Oh, Lordy, do you think it will spoil my velvet? Said Kitty, and she seized a discarded newspaper from a bench and wrapped it around herself like a cloak. She gazed into the distance, peering at every clump of trees. I can't see any big oaks. These trees are all too little and spindly to offer any protection. Can't we go indoors somewhere again? I said, clutching my clean blue dress. I don't want to get my frock dirty. Aha! Said Kitty, staring at something on the horizon. I know where we can go. I stared at the silhouetted dark buildings, the tall chimneys of a factory, the fancy domes of the grim gin palaces, and a solitary church spire. I couldn't see anywhere that promised safety and shelter, but Kitty was smiling now. You'll see. We went out of the park and walked along with the crowds hurrying home. Kitty stopped outside one of the taverns, which was already crowded. Oh, Kitty, we can't go in there, I said, seeing the red-faced men and the rude women shrieking with laughter. We're not going in, said Kitty. I'm simply taking my slippers off, as they're stopping me wriggling my toes. That's a relief. Only bad people go in gin palaces, I said primly. We're good people, said Kitty. We're going to church. I stared at her. Church? You mean pray to find a place to stay? No, you noodle, we'll stay in the church itself, said Kitty. But we can't. It's not allowed. You only go to church if there's a service, I said. We'll get into such trouble. Churches are holy places. Well, we'll be holy. You can sing of them hymns, said Kitty. Come on, my newspaper's getting soggy. We ran through the streets, Kitty clutching her old frock to her chest. Poor Trampy must have been bounced head over heels inside the pocket, but we didn't hear a squeak from her. We slowed down when we got to the church and opened the old-fashioned gate. We sidled up the path, peering left and right at the gravestones. Kitty looked very solemn. I wondered if she was thinking of Gaffer. Perhaps this was the very graveyard where Gaffer was buried. I put my arm around her, and she stared in surprise, but smiled at me. She didn't stop short at any of the graves and start weeping. She simply patted all the ones she passed, as if she were greeting them. So I copied her. The church door was closed. I tried the large iron door handle, but it wouldn't move. Oh dear, it must be locked. We can't go in after all, I said. but Kitty gave her frock to hold, took the large iron handle with both hands, twisted it round with all her strength and pushed hard, and the door creaked open. "Aha!" she whispered triumphantly. She put her finger to her lips and then crept inside. I followed her cautiously into the dark, silent church. The fading light cast red and yellow and blue patterns on the stone floor, with the rows of wooden pews, which were very shadowy. I peered hard, trying to see if anyone was still sitting there. I was very conscious of my boots squeaking as I advanced up the aisle. There was a large statue of Mary, holding baby Jesus beside a marble pillar. Her head was on one side as if she were looking at me. I bobbed a little curtsy to her, and then scuttled further up the church to the altar. I bowed my head to the cross and mumbled, "Hello, our Father which art in heaven. I do hope you don't mind us being in your house." "What?" Kitty asked. "I'm being polite," I hissed. "And keep your voice down. The vicar might still be in here." "Where?" "Maybe around the corner, in the little private bit where he puts his robes on," I said. We tiptoed cautiously forward. There was no sign of the vicar, but his special cape and long dress were hanging up neatly on 2 pegs, and his copy of the Bible was lying on top of a small cabinet. Kitty stroked the fine black leather and the ornate silver clasp and opened it up carefully. She squinted at the words at the beginning of Genesis. "In the beginning God created the heaven and the earth," she said, wrinkling her nose with effort. Then she went on more fluently, "And he said, I've created this church for any little girls who want to stay here. So, and Kitty and Lucy are especially welcome." "That's good," I said. Kitty was poking in a cupboard now. "Oh my," she said, bringing out a bottle of wine. "The vicar is a secret drinker. Naughty man." "No, I think that's special communion wine, Kitty," I corrected her. "Should we have some?" said Kitty, fingering the cork. "No, we absolutely must not. We're not allowed to drink any kind of wine, especially church wine. I dare say we'd be struck down dead if we took so much as a sip," I declared. "Nonsense," said Kitty. "It's already opened. Watch." She eased the cork out and tilted the bottle. I thought she was just teasing me, but she put her lips to the end of the bottle and drank. "Kitty!" she spluttered, wine dribbling down her chin. "Now look what you made me do. My stars, I haven't splashed my jacket, have I?" She checked to make sure. "It would be God's punishment if you had," I said, shocked. "You mustn't drink any more." "It didn't taste nice anyway," said Kitty, shuddering. She recorked the bottle and thrust it back onto the cupboard. She wandered back into the church and tried lying on a pew. "They're not very comfy," she said, "but I like these little cushion things. They'd be good for pillows." "They're for when you pray. You kneel on them," I said. "Only Nurse used to say her swollen old knees needed a cushion each." I suddenly bent over, clutching myself. "What's the matter?" Kitty asked. "Have you got a stomachache?" "No. I just miss Nurse so much," I mumbled. "I know that feeling," said Kitty, and she came and put her arms around me. "I miss Gaffer that way." We held each other tightly for a moment. "But now we have each other," I said. "That's right," said Kitty, "and we look after each other, don't we? You've even written me my very own song." I started singing it to cheer us up, and Kitty turned somersaults all the way up the aisle and back. I hoped God wouldn't mind too much. Then we wandered up and down the pews, wondering which one to sleep on. "Look," Kitty shouted suddenly, making me jump. "You mustn't shout in a church. What is it?" "Someone's left their shawl behind. It slipped down in the shadow under the pew. Oh, it's so soft and lovely, look." It was the finest quality paisley cashmere, the sort of shawl the new mother would wear. Kitty wound it around her shoulders. It looked a little strange over her red acrobat outfit, her skinny bare legs sticking out below, but Kitty seemed very pleased with herself. "I'm Lady Kitty wearing my best shawl," she said, stepping out grandly. "You can be my little servant girl, Lucy, and must do everything I say. Oh, this will be a good game." I wasn't sure about that, but I let her boss me about for 5 minutes or so, and then she let me have a turn at being Lady Lucy while she grovelled and scraped, and then we were 2 ladies, and I rocked the shawl in my arms, pretending I was showing my new baby to my friend. "I have a real baby sister at home. She's called Angelique," I told Kitty. "Do you miss her?" Kitty asked. "Not very much," I said truthfully. "They didn't let me play with her because she was so small. I wonder if they'll tell her she has a half-sister when she's a little older, or maybe they'll forget all about me. Nobody will know I've ever existed." My voice wavered. "Your nurse will know," said Kitty firmly. "Do you think I will ever see her again?" I asked. "Yes, I'm sure of it, if you want to enough," said Kitty. She paused. "Do you think I'll ever see Gaffer again?" she asked in a tiny voice, so I could barely hear her. I didn't know what to say. If Gaffer was dead, how could she possibly see him? Did she mean in heaven? Kitty didn't seem at all a religious person, but perhaps she still had faith. "Yes, I think he will, but not for a long, long time," I said. because obviously I didn't want her to die in the near future. She seemed satisfied with the answer, nodding thoughtfully. It was getting darker now, and we had a long and tiring day, so we decided to settle down to sleep. We tried out the pews, but they were so narrow there was a danger we'd fall with a clunk if we turned over in the night. We settled on the floor itself, with the shawl wrapped around both of us, and the hassocks for pillows. They were a little too high and made our necks ache, so we took Trampy out of the pocket and rolled up Kitty's dress for a shared pillow instead. Trampy can stretch the legs and have a little run around, said Kitty, kissing the mouse on the end of her nose. But you have to come back, promise me, little Trampy. Trampy squeaked, which Kitty took for a yes. She let her go, and the mouse darted away. We cuddled up together, and we were still clinging to each other when we woke at dawn. I felt someone very tiny scrabbling at my ankle. Trampy's trying to get into my boot, I murmured. She can't be. She's curled up in my neck, said Kitty. I sat up stiffly and saw Trampy by my toes, Trampy at Kitty's head. Then Trampy running across the stone flags. Trampy twitching on top of the pile of hymn books. Trampy, Trampy, Trampy everywhere. Oh, my lord, I said. Are you praying? Kitty asked sleepily. No, I'm exclaiming. There are masses of mice all over everywhere. Kitty sat up too and exclaimed. How will we know which one's Trampy? I asked. That's easy. This one's Trampy because she's nestled up against me, said Kitty. But that Trampy suddenly ran off, and another took her place, running up Kitty's leg, and yet another jumped into her hand. Oh dear, said Kitty. I think they all want to be Trampy. Well, we can't keep them all, I said, not at all sure I liked so many mice playing together at one time. Then we heard the sudden creak of the door, and a shaft of early sunlight illuminated the church. I saw the dark silhouette of a man with a significant high collar. The vicar. The mice dashed for cover, disappearing in the darkness under the pews. Kitty pulled me underneath too. We lay there, trembling, while the vicar strode down the aisle, the boots ringing on the flagged floor. We hoped he'd disappear into his little room, so we could run like the mice. But he stopped by the front pew, bent his knee in front of the altar, and then started murmuring to himself. What's he doing? Kitty whispered into my ear. I think he's saying his prayers, I whispered back. Well, I wish you'd be quick about it, said Kitty. I've got cramp in my leg from lying tucked up like this. The vicar was very slow. He must have prayed for a full 10 minutes, maybe longer. I wish he wasn't quite so devout. But then at long last he murmured Amen, straightened up, and walked off to his room, humming a hymn to himself. Quick, said Kitty. We scrambled to our feet. Trampy, Trampy, Kitty whispered, but her little mouse didn't seem to hear. Who's there? The vicar called, sounding alarmed. I will not have any tramps desecrating this holy church, especially on the Lord's Day. We must run for it, I said, gathering up the shawl, and we charged for the open door. We were good runners, and the vicar was elderly and encumbered by his robe, so he didn't have much chance of catching us. We ran down to the lich gate and out along the road, and didn't stop until we were streets away. Then Kitty leaned against the wall, clutching her chest. We've left Trampy, she said. Oh no, I said, but we didn't know which one she was. I did, Kitty insisted, though I think she was fibbing. And I've left my brown frock too. But it was very old and ragged, and rather dirty, I said. But look, I've still got the shawl. I'm sure it's cashmere because it's so soft. You can have it if you like, to make up for losing Trampy. She will think I've deserted her, said Kitty, still sounding heartbroken. No, she won't. She's got lots of little friends now. She's going to love being a church mouse, I said. Not as much as she loved being with me, said Kitty. And I want my frock back. Gaffer bought it for me. I have to get it back. She turned and started running in the direction of the church. You can't. Not now. That vicar will catch you, I warned her, clutching her by the shoulder. I'll wait till he's gone, said Kitty. But he'll be there all day if it's Sunday, I said. How do you know it's Sunday? Kitty asked, stopping still. The vicar said, it's the Lord's Day. People go to church on a Sunday to say their prayers, I exclaimed. I know, said Kitty. And chapel. Stop keeping on telling me stuff as if I'm stupid. I know far more than you do, so just hold your tongue, will you? I stared at her in shock. Why are you being so mean all of a sudden, I asked. Because... Oh, because, said Kitty, and she had tears in her eyes. She turned her face away and wiped her face fiercely, but I could hear her sniffling. I suppose we could sneak back to the church after the morning service, when the vicar goes to have his dinner, I said. If you're really missing Trampy that much, I expect your frock will still be tucked up under the pew. We'll get it back for you, Kitty. She sniffed hard. It would be silly to go back, I know. The vicar might be on the lookout for us. I don't imagine I'd ever find Trampy. Anyway, you're right. She seemed very happy to be with all the other mice. And I wish I could still have my old frock, but I know it was all ragged. I've got my red velvet now. You look very nice in it, I said. It really suits you, and you can be the tumbling boy when you wear it. You're being very nice, even though I was mean. I'm sorry, Lucy, Kitty said, turning to me. She had tears running down her cheeks now. Oh, poor Kitty. I put my arms around her and hugged her. Don't be so sad. We're going to have a lovely day today. We've still got plenty of tin, so we'll have a good breakfast, and then we'll walk around and try to find the perfect place to do our performance. We need somewhere with lots and lots of people, but no shops. Can you think of anywhere, Kitty? She wiped her face with the back of her hand and took a last big sniff. I can't do the tumbling boy this morning, she said. Why not? Have you got tired of it? Don't worry, I'll make up something else. Maybe you could be a little red elf. A little red elf who looked after himself, but then he got lonely all on his own and wanted a friend who shall we send? Yes. Then you choose someone from the crowd and dance with them, and then you give them your elf cap to go around the audience asking for a penny, if you have any. Oh, it'll be perfect, I said, very pleased with my idea. I hoped Kitty would cheer up and be suitably impressed, but she didn't seem to be listening. Didn't you want to be an elf? I asked. You don't have to be, if you think it's too babyish. No, I can't be anything this morning. I have to go and do something. I always go on Sundays, she said. Well, all right then. What is it? I asked. It's a secret, said Kitty. You can't come. But I'm your friend. You can't have secrets from me, I protested. It's just one secret, that's all. I'll buy us breakfast first, and then you can go back to that park and wait for me there. All right? Said Kitty. It wasn't all right at all. My heart was thudding hard beneath my blue cotton bodice. Please, don't leave me all by myself, I begged. Don't be silly. There'll be lots of people in the park later on. You'll find some other children easily, and then you can play with them until I come back, said Kitty. You will come back. You absolutely promise. I absolutely promise, Kitty echoed. I had to do my best to believe her. And that is where we will leave part 5 of The Runaway Girls by Jacqueline Wilson. I'll be back soon with lots more stories and the next part of this fantastic story. If you'd like to subscribe or hit a like, that's always appreciated. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.